Hi everyone, Sandman here. This video is brought to you by a donation from Gareth, and he wants me to review his book, Rocket Man, and here's what he has to say. Hi Sandman, I would like to say first off that this book is primarily meant for entertainment. I watch your vids as well as many other MGTOW and men-related content. When I wrote this book, I would say that I tried to infuse all the various views I absorbed as well as my own. However, I would also say that I really have to consider the economics of my business, and since women make up a huge part of the book audience, that's what I did. I did not go all out and explore all the various facets of the world that I'm creating. If, however, I actually find an audience among men, I will of course cater to my audience. With that being said, I can still make small changes based on your opinions. If you like this book, please inform me before you put up your review, so that I can actually plan a marketing campaign around the release of your vid. I would like to make the book available for free for the first day of the release of your vid, so that your regulars can also get it for free. Now all of this is dependent on if you like it, if you hate it, or are possibly disgusted by it. Then of course I would hope that you simply forgive me for wasting your time. Thanks a lot for your consideration, Mr. Sandman. Your vids are very humorous, and I honestly strive to do the same with my craft. Thank you. Well, Gareth, thanks for your donation as well as your topic, and I do in fact like your book. I'm sorry it took me way longer than usual to do this review, but I had read and made notes in the first half of the book. Then I had a hard drive crash I had to deal with, and I basically sent out the hard drive to Crawl, a company that takes the data off the drive. But this video should be seen as a constructive criticism for your work as well as a review. First off, this book is a work of fiction and centers around the main character Jin. The adventure begins with him heading off to a space station that I believe is built into the side of an asteroid. He goes there to meet with a dark woman named Caramel and one of the brothels. This happens in the Hadean galaxy, which is a long way from Earth, obviously. But in this point in history, there are apparently hundreds of space stations and asteroids. Humans left Earth 500 years before, so it's sort of like that show, Firefly, as well as the more recent show, The Expanse. So if you like those, then you'll probably like this book. There are also VR habitats in the station that look like the Atlantic Ocean or Mount Everest. I guess they put in holodecks or holosuits so that people wouldn't go crazy. One thing I didn't get about this book, and I actually had original criticism for, was that there were still prostitutes around, even though there were lifelike androids. I'm predicting that when our civilization makes lifelike androids, that will mostly be the end for sex with real people. But in this book, Jin sleeps with Caramel, but she's actually an imposter stabbing him over and over again, trying to kill him. She was a changeling whore impersonating Caramel and was there to kill him. The majority of time, this changeling killed men using her sexuality as a weapon to entice them and make them vulnerable. Now where have we heard that before? But she underestimates Jin's technopathic abilities to transfer his consciousness from his body to his robot suit. He pretty much does that when she ends up trying to kill him, and then his robot suit returns to the station to pick up his body, as well as picking up the imposter. They then briefly leave the station and they get to know each other, and then eventually they return, and he actually has a chip inside of her that allows him to control her. When they get back, they're attacked by agents that are also trying to kill him. This kind of reminds me of the original Total Recall film on the planet Mars, and not the stupid remake. Think of this book like Total Recall meaning Neuromancer. So Jin goes back to find out who put a hit on him. Mamba, the character who's actually imposter, says that he was an easy mark because he always goes to the same brothel and sleeps with the same prostitute. So then there's a big shootout scene and they eventually return to his ship and his real body is healed after 10 days, which basically allows him to put his consciousness back in at some point. I like this idea of transferring consciousness from one's body to technology and then back to the body again. In the future, we might actually be given new bodies and temporarily transfer our consciousness to a computer and then back to a body again. The only issue I have with this is that when you make a copy of your consciousness, is the original basically gone or are you still there? How would we ever know? Recently I was asking this question to many people and the majority of women I asked had no issues transferring their consciousness to a younger version of themselves. Perhaps this could be a Turing test for humans. After all, a human being, if they believe the seat of consciousness rests in the brain, wouldn't actually buy into this idea that consciousness can be transferred without being lost. But then again, we don't know this because so far, no one has done it yet. It really makes me wonder about the level of female consciousness if they're so eager to transfer it out. Mamba is also an interesting character because she's a changeling and can transform herself into any lover that a man can desire. That's the way I think the perfect sex bot would be, being able to transform itself into whatever it wants, instead of a real doll with a fixed appearance. Speaking of augmented reality, check out the ODG 4K video that I also put in the description. But getting back to the book, once this odd couple makes their escape, and Jin's body is fully healed, he tells Mamba that he wants to have sex with her. So she figures that he's basically kept her around so that he could rape her. She responds by asking him this question: "You do know what happens to people that touch me, right?" To that he responds by saying, "That's okay, I'll just go into the chamber after each session." She of course is talking about this idea that anyone that comes into physical contact with her will get toxins from her body that will basically eventually kill them. She also penetrated his body with a knife, and I guess he thinks that penetrating her body with his penis isn't such a bad trade. Apparently he said all the right things and put her in her place, and she even opens up her legs for him without even being coaxed into it. In all honesty, I think the only reason this happens is because he has higher status than she does, or he outsmarted her. We all know that women are attracted to men that are more intelligent than they are. After making love with her, he goes back into his healing chamber because Mamba is poisonous and finds out that he has an incurable STD from her. But even though she was excited by him during the lovemaking session, he had to transfer his consciousness back to the Rocket Man robot, and she was happy with that because she didn't actually have to have sex with him once again. That's women for you. And that was also good character creation on your part, Gareth. Jin also ends up admitting to Mamba that he's a slave to his sexuality, and that he also didn't have any emotional connections to Caramel, the prostitute that Mamba had killed. He said he was married and that Caramel took 8 years of his life and his marriage. It's at this point in the story where we learn that the sector of the galaxy that Jin is from outlaws interracial relationships, pornography, and I'm also guessing to some extent sex bots. So now it makes sense why he would actually be with a prostitute instead of a robot. Then Mamba explains why she became a shapeshifter in the first place, so that she could become a better looking mate and make it in the porn business in her sector of space, which apparently specializes in sex and pornography. That was their main industry. So she had reptile DNA spliced with her own, but the side effect is that she became so toxic that she couldn't actually work in the porn business, so that's why she became an assassin. With regards to Jin, his mother actually overdosed on some nano drugs when she was pregnant with him, and that made him born with the ability to communicate with machines telepathically. I guess the nanites in his bloodstream fused with him in some sort of way. Because his mother did that, Jin's father actually had her killed. At this point, we also learn that Jin has an affinity for black women, more like an addiction, and that's why he was with Caramel. Then the two of them go to the planet Vagria, which is where the agency that hired Jin's killer is headquartered. The place is run by female agents that are apparently no match for a real man. So the two of them fight the female agents, and at one point, Jin's suit is going to run out of power, so he tells Mamba to let go of his suit and fall to her death. She of course doesn't want to do this, and they tumble together to the bottom of a platform. He frees her from the kill switch that he has over her, and then lets her go. Then she risks her own life to get power to save his consciousness. That's something that I don't believe most women would normally do because women don't consider themselves disposable. But apparently she falls for him because he's fallen for her and gives her attention. Attention is like sex for most women, as I've talked about before. Later on we learn that Caramel the prostitute was a clone, and that she herself was a clone, and that in this universe porn actresses sell their DNA for cloning for extra revenue. The sector of space that they're in is called the Venus sector, where the women rule the government and set the agenda. Jin doesn't buy this, and he says that only men build civilizations and maintain them, and Mamba then thinks he's sexist. Apparently this part of the galaxy was founded by feminists. We also learn that a bunch of Manginas were the ones that started the matriarchy there, and eventually the women in that society became all about money and profit, apparently just like men. Then the discussion turns to feminism being about women selling sex. According to feminism in this book, women were told that they were slaves at home, and thus they needed to be freed, but in the end they just became depressed whores. I have to hand it to you, Gareth, you got that one right. Anyways, I don't want to spoil the ending to make this review too long, so you'll actually have to read it for yourselves. The link is in the description as well to the book. But just so you briefly know what happens, there's a reunion between Jin and his old wife, and another reunion between Jin and his father after he learns that his dad is the one responsible for his mother's death. Could his father be the one responsible for hiring Mamba to kill Jin in the first place? Again, you'll have to read it for yourselves to find out. Now just a recap about your writing style, Gareth. I thought your protagonist Jin was extremely well written. He's a post-human with a cyborg guy, and he was a technopath with the ability to communicate with computers with a sort of telepathy. I haven't come across that type of story in science fiction before. Maybe I haven't read enough to see something like that, but I thought that it was imaginative. How he transfers his consciousness to a suit called the Robot Man after he's stabbed by Mamba and left for dead is also rather interesting. I also once again like the technopathy and the ability to control machines and computers with the mind. Very few science fiction stories have dealt with this. It got me thinking that what if instead of Star Trek's Borg collective controlled by a hive mind, it was controlled by an individual? That would be far more dangerous. Or possibly an army of technological weapons controlled by an individual mind instead of a collective. You also didn't discuss how gravity works in your book. In the show The Expanse, certain humans develop differently depending on the gravity on their asteroids. But I guess they perfected artificial gravity generators in your book. Also, I would have liked it if you raised more questions about consciousness, like the idea of artificial intelligence in an Iron Man suit, except the AI is the person inside. Also, another cool thing that you could go into with regards to your future books is discussing the transfer of consciousness to a computer while the person is sleeping. That is something that I'd like to read more about because we spend 1/3 of our lives sleeping, and wouldn't it be great if we could actually capture that time for other purposes? Even if I were writing science fiction, I would discuss this idea that we're living in a computer-simulated universe. Apparently, scientists have discovered block linear self-dual error-correcting code when they analyze strings in string theory. This computer code was designed by Claude Shannon back in the 1940s, and apparently it's now been discovered embedded within the equations of superstring theory. So we're getting closer to answering the question about what consciousness is. Anyways, that's all I've got to say for today. Thanks again, Gareth, for your donation and for sharing your good book. If anyone wants a copy, then I actually put the Amazon link in the description for his ebook, which is only $3.99. This book is part of a series that Gareth is working on. The Rocket Man Loving a Killer ebook is the 5th book in that series. The series is called Dark Love. Also, don't forget to check out the MGTOW mystery link and also like this video. As for everyone else out there, please follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook to get tomorrow's video today. Thanks for taking your daily dose of red pills. And remember, a red pill a day keeps the shape-shifting prostitutes away. So enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.